If you want to know how to get this pro level blurry effect on your photos, or even a pin sharp focus throughout as shown in this group shot, it's pretty essential that you understand how a camera's aperture works. So stick around as I break this topic down into simple steps using 5 little coffee pods and a number of strips of A4 paper, because once you understand aperture, you'll be able to completely change and control the whole vibe of your shots. Now, in its simplest form, this is what an aperture actually does, and it sits in the camera lens. It's a mechanical device that just opens wide or closes. It's like a circle, and it lets more light into the camera sensor, which in this case is my eye, as it opens wide. But it's not quite as simple as that, because it does something else with this thing called depth of field. So let's grab the coffee pods, let's grab the A4 sheet of paper and see if we can make sense of it all. So I'm virtually ready to take the photos. Now today I'm going to use the camera in aperture priority mode. Don't get too stressed about this. I'll do a separate video on the different modes of the camera. Simply means that in aperture priority mode, I look after the aperture, the camera does everything else for me. I'll roll the aperture all the way down to 1.7, which is the lowest it can go on this lens. Let's roll the aperture now to around about 5.6 of 22. So these little white strips are giving you a visual idea of how far the focus is reaching into the image. So for instance, with this one here, when we had the camera on a 1.7 aperture, it's only actually got the first few millimeters of the image in focus, and that of course expands across the width of the images. When we then changed the aperture setting to 5.6, the focus was reaching further into the image, again represented by these 2 little strips of paper. So the first coffee pod, the second and the third one were in focus, but the fourth and the fifth one were getting a little, or remaining a little bit blurry. And then finally, with the aperture set at 22, you can see from the photo that we're showing on the screen right now that all of the coffee pods were in focus. And in fact, if you look at the plants in the background, you'll see that they're almost getting into focus as well. So there's a lot more of the image is actually in focus. Shallow depth of field is this situation where you've got the aperture on a really low setting and you're getting a really shallow depth of field represented by this tiny little strip of paper here. So only the first few millimeters of the image are actually in focus across that band. So time to get out there then and try these new settings with your aperture and see what difference they can make to your shots. So go ahead and hit that like button if you got something out of this clip today. And don't forget, if there's something that you want to learn specifically about photography, drop me a comment.